All right.
Cool, thanks.
So now is your opportunity to, I don't know how often this happens, you get to watch a film and then you get to actually speak with the person who is responsible for said film. So now is your chance. We have Stephen Moskovic, who is the executive producer. His father is of course featured in the film, and you may recognize this guy from the film. He should look slightly familiar to you.
A little bit older.
None of us have aged at all ever. So do you have any questions that you guys want to start out with?
There's got to be questions because I know we didn't explain it perfectly. There's a lot of, you must be confused about something at least. Go ahead.
What was with the rocks? Like, they took the rock to one of the grave spots and then they were putting it on, I guess, was that the railroad track?
That's a Jewish tradition. Rather than flowers, to put a stone on the grave. Yeah. You'll see in a Jewish cemetery, you'll see all stones. People will put flowers because non-Jews will come and they'll put flowers, but you'll always see stones stacked up. Yeah.
How did you pick the people to feature in your movie? Like, why specifically? Of course, there's your dad.
Right.
And there's the three others, and there's some other ones that were featured. Like, how did you pick?
Sure. Okay. So I don't know if you guys heard. So the question: how did we pick the four guys? So one was easy. It was my father. So this was easy. I knew he was going to be part of the story. It was not easy because we didn't know. When we only had from September of 2009 until we had to shoot the ceremony, the commemoration in April of 2010, and the team I put together, the guys that worked with me on this, we were really. I would never say we're experts on the subject. We knew almost nothing about the subject. I knew a little bit about what my father had said to me, and when I first found out the fact that there was like a children's block, it was sort of news to me. It was something he never said to me growing up. So there was a whole learning curve in those 7 or 8 months. And on top of it, we had to find these people. So there was a professor at Michigan State University named Ken Waltzer, who's in the film, who Jenny knows very well. And Ken had interviewed my father. So my father said, you should speak to this guy, Ken Waltzer, because he can help you first of all with the timetable and the history of everything, and get the facts correct, help you get the facts correct, and he can help you choose some of the guys, because if he's interviewed me, he must have interviewed others, and he interviewed at least 100 others. So we relied on him. We explained to him the story. We got him on board. He agreed he would be a consultant for us, and we said, so who do you think you would choose? And he narrowed it down to about 10 or 12 survivors, and from there. I had a producer who spoke German, I had a producer who spoke Hebrew, and from there we kind of narrowed it down to these three. Some couldn't tell their story very well, some did not want to participate in the film. Some were ill and not able to do it, but the one thing we knew, we wanted people from, we didn't want just survivors that were here in America. We wanted them from around the world. We actually tried to get somebody from Australia, but we couldn't do that. And so we ended up with a Czech and two Israelis. They're Israeli now, but Israel Lazar, he was Romanian originally, and Naftali was from Czechoslovakia. So I think we got a good sort of mixture of people and a different experience for each of them. But that's how we did it. It wasn't easy. Yes?
First, thank you for
No, thank you for coming.
helping us to remember.
Thank you.
And you touched on it, but your childhood, your growing up, did you just discover this story at recently, as your father, was he able to talk about any of his experiences as you were growing up?
So the question is, did I know about this growing up? So my father, I knew what happened to his family because, you know, he married my mother who was Catholic, and from here, he met her here. So, and we had all this family on her side of it, but we had no relatives, no cousins, no nothing. So as kids, you're curious as, you know, as to why. So we knew this happened, and from reading and watching documentaries on TV, knew a little bit, and my father told us a little bit. So, but then once he retired, he was older and he retired, the Shoah Foundation, which is this foundation created by Steven Spielberg, where they attempted to document the story of every living survivor, they went and interviewed him. At this time, he was living in Florida, because we grew up in New York. So I learned a lot from watching that 4.5 hours of testimony. I learned most of it. But the interesting thing was, and I've discussed this with Professor Walzer, why, and he said it's a common sort of thing. He never mentioned the Kinderblock. So I didn't learn about that until we were in Europe together, and we were in Prague. So we were invited to go to Buchenwald, and we went, and I just found out about this on this trip, and that's when I decided actually to make the film, because they said, oh, next year we're having this commemoration for the 65th anniversary of the liberation. We want to invite you, you should come. And I said, oh, there's going to be all these survivors in one place. We should do something about this. But yeah, but it was, you know, I said to my father, I said, why would you leave? Like, and you know, I mean, he said, I don't know, you know, it was the last 3 months or so of my captivity, and as difficult as it was, and you saw the horrible conditions, they said it was a cesspool and this and that, he said, you know, it was the easiest part of it, because they were, remember when they said that they kept them inside, they would roll call, count them inside, like somebody, Kalina, they were sort of being taken care of, as opposed to when they were in Poland, in Auschwitz-Birkenau, that was a death camp. The only purpose of that camp was to kill people. And so in his mind, that was the horrible part. That was the part that was foremost in his mind, not this part of it. So, yes?
So, going back to like a lot of them, like you can see in their eyes just the traumaticness they have experienced. So
Sure.
was that so barrier for talking to them?
For us talking to them?
Yeah, and like getting information, like was that a huge barrier for y'all?
Yeah, of course, because you don't want to upset them. So the question is, was it a barrier for us because you could see the sorrow and sort of the pain in their eyes? Did that create a barrier for us talking to them? You know, what you saw, it was many visits with them. We visited Israel twice. We visited the Czech Republic twice during 2 years. And it took a little, they had to trust us, first of all. And I think the trust sped up the fact that I'm the child of one of them. So I think if we just went in there as just some guys from Hollywood or from New York, oh, we want to do this, I don't think they would have opened up as quickly as they did, but they did. And I can say that after the first day with each of them, maybe probably the first few hours with each of them, we felt like friends, and they've even said we feel like they felt like, because when I went with a team of like 3 other guys on all these, except for the big event, we had like 12 guys there to film, but they felt, you know, they've told me that I feel like, they feel like I'm their son, you know, so, and they felt that way early on. They felt that they could trust us with their story. And remember, this is not the first time. They've all had told their stories to schools and things like that. So they have talked about it, and not that they'll open up to just anybody, but they felt the trust. But still, we treaded lightly. You know, we were very conscious of not making them cry. So there was a lot of like laughter during this, and then there were the moments of crying. They would cry, we would cry, and because I always had a translator too, so we knew exactly what was going on. And I didn't conduct the interviews in the other language. We knew what we were saying, and I had producers who spoke the other languages. But we were careful, but they came out with stuff that we wouldn't even dare ask. Let's put it that way. They shared more than we asked. So that's what made the film the way it is, you know. There was a question back here.
With all the hours that you had recording information and getting this, clearly you had to make some decisions of what it is that you wanted to show.
Right.
And sometimes you probably had some story content or something that you wanted to show, but weren't able. And I was wondering, what were some of those things that you weren't able to put in that you would have liked to if you were given a little bit more time?
So the first version of the film that we actually just showed to some people to get their opinion, we didn't show it to an audience really. It was like 4 hours. So that was the things that we felt were sort of important. And most of that was historians, and there was other survivors who were not of the four. We let them tell a bit, not that we went to their homes, but the interviews we did at Buchenwald. Those were kind of the things we left out, and there were some that were more graphic in nature, about some torture and just things that they saw that we felt. You know, there's been a lot of things that show these kinds of images. We showed some of the images. I just felt that it wasn't necessary to get the point, you know, the story across, the feeling across, that we had to be so graphic. And then also then it would limit the age. I think this is like an appropriate film starting at the age of maybe 13, maybe 12 in some situations, you know. So that's sort of where we drew, you know, where we drew the line. I can't necessarily say anything specific more than that, except maybe some of the stories you heard, maybe they elaborated a little bit more, and we just had to, you know, sort of chop the story, you know, chop it down to try to keep it to 90 minutes. There was a question, yeah.
Yes, sir. I know you said your father only was in Kimberly Block for about 3 months or so, but did he ever stay in touch with any of the survivors, or did he know any of the other 3 men you showed for the film?
So when we found these guys, and the other 3, and I would go to Israel, and we went to Germany to meet them. They didn't really know each other. Lazar and the 2 Israeli guys, they knew each other because they knew each other in Israel. Like after the fact, they sort of, with Holocaust groups or things, they knew, even though they don't live in the same city, but they knew, they were acquainted. No, they did not keep in touch, no. And they said that mostly you kept with people who were like local to you, and not even local to country, like local to your part of the country, to towns near you when you were in there, because you didn't trust anybody. You know, it's like being, if any of you, I've never been in prison, but if any of you have seen things about, you know, nobody trusts anybody. Just imagine, this is probably exponentially how many times worse than any normal, you know, American prison that you could go into, that you can't, and especially as a child, and you're a child, and you're in prison with hardened criminals, and, you know, because remember, when they were in Auschwitz-Birkenau, it was pretty much an extermination camp for Jews. Once they got, but they were in there with adults too, you know, so it was adults and children, and there were women there in Birkenau, although most of the women were murdered immediately, some were kept for certain jobs that women could do. Once they got to Buchenwald was not a death camp. Buchenwald was a concentration camp, a work camp. So originally, very few of the prisoners, there may have been some Jews who went in there, but mostly they were communists and opponents of the Nazis. So it was more of a work camp because, you know, the camp, this whole thing of having these prisoners was all a profit-making enterprise. I mean, so so I'll just get a little bit away from your question, but I think you understand what I'm saying. So when you study a lot of this, you say, okay, yeah, of course, there was hatred for homosexuals, there was certainly hatred for Jews, and hatred for anybody who looked different or acted different. But a lot of it was just plain old that they just stole everything from these people, and they put them to work they wanted slave labor, so it was slavery, on top of the hatred and the murder and everything else. When my father was taken from his town, the police, guaranteed everybody, oh, you're just going away to a work camp. You know, they made up some stories, and we're locking and we're gonna guard everybody's house and this and that. And when he went back, he found out that like the moment that they were gone and out of town, first the police went in and took whatever they wanted, and when they were finished, the rest of the people from the town could go in and take whatever they want from the houses, and then people could actually just move into the home, because everybody knew they were never coming back. So there was somebody else had their hand raised. I know that's a lot to think about. When I got old enough and could understand really that's what it was, it is a shocking that people did this to their neighbors, right? And their friends, basically, right? So, yeah.
Can you say a little bit about the process you followed for the IRI cameras? Did you give them prompts to think about, or did you ask them to just choose when to proceed with the camera?
Yeah, that's a good question. We get that question all the time. So we came up with that idea kind of late, but before we went to meet them, and we sort of gave them an explanation, and we just gave them sort of like topics, talk about what life was like before, what life was like when you were taken away, and any kind of memories that you might have. And we, it was just a few bullet points. That was kind of it. And we said, and if you have any questions, email us or call us. But you can talk about anything you want. And that's what we got. We got a lot more stuff too, but this, we try to round it out and mix it in to tell the story. But yeah, we kind of left them on their own, and we were unsure. We're like, is we going to get anything we could use, And we were pleasantly surprised.
How many hours or how much footage do you have from that?
Of just from
Of
those
them, yeah, from
those
from
cameras?
just the guys recording themselves.
I think in total we had, of everything that we shot and everything, we had about 100 hours of stuff. Of just them, I think each guy, probably about between 20 and 30 hours.
So they use them pretty regularly.
Oh yeah, they use them, and some of them were able to download, because I forget how much. Geez, those devices, you can't even get them anymore. But every 35 or 40 minutes you had a download, I think. So we taught them. Two of the guys they couldn't figure out, so we had to somehow say, oh, but don't you have a friend, somebody who has a son or a daughter who knows how to do this kind of stuff? And so somebody would come over and load everything, and then we'd get we'd get an email or a hard drive with the footage on it. But but it all worked.
Yeah, like I think that was some of the most kind of endearing, right? When you start with that, and they're like fiddling with it, and you're just like you immediately are vested, right? Like you're like, oh, I want to know what happens to this person. I think that was.
Yeah, I agree. It makes them it makes them real, and plus, you're looking at these elderly men, and they're trying to learn things that that you all know. It's very simple for you and people my kids' age, and even much easier for me. But you see them embrace it and like want to learn, because they wanted to. These guys wanted to help us so bad to tell their story. I mean, they were so grateful to us. When we showed this for the first time, we showed it at Buchenwald. I can't even tell you the looks on their faces for this. I mean, they were so happy, and it's because they put the effort in to help us, you know. So, yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about, toward the end, you have a lot of their partners talking about what it sort of meant to them. Did you get a lot of feedback like that from the family members about how maybe this, like for you, maybe open up an experience that they hadn't really talked to their family about before?
So did I get feedback
Yeah,
from?
like to the other, so at the end, the partners are talking.
Right.
To other family members, children and grandchildren. Did anyone, when they had seen the film, have you had any feedback from them about what this experience has meant to them as like a family, maybe with their father or grandfather, talking about these things for the first time, maybe with them?
Yeah, I mean, Naftali's daughter, who I became very, I mean, they're so happy. They said that they learned things that they would have never known. And Lazar has he's got two sons. He's got one son actually living in New Jersey. They all and one son in Israel and a daughter who lives, I don't know, in Holland or something. But they were all very appreciative, as well as Pavel's children. Pavel's children don't speak any English, so we don't really communicate that much. But his wife, every time she sees me, I get a big hug and a thank you, and I tell her, you don't have to thank me. I should thank you guys. But yeah, they're all very appreciative. And also from my family, it was more like, well, my son is in some of the scenes. My oldest son was there when we shot the commemoration. You'll see there's like a younger boy with my father a couple of times. That's my son. And I think they appreciate that they're going to have this to remember. A lot of people don't know things about their grandparents or great-grandparents because there's just not, stories aren't recorded or anything like that. So yeah, everybody appreciates it. And just so you know, so my Naftali is still living, and so is Lazar. And Pavel passed away 2 years ago, and my father passed away a month ago. So there's just two of them left. Yeah, and all the U.S. veterans, they're all gone as well. So we made the film at the right time while we could. There's somebody else had on this side, no? Yeah.
The one woman from the nearby village that gave testimony of not knowing about what was going on so nearby, were there other testimonies of similar to that, or?
So everybody remembers the woman who was the entertainer. She said she would, at the theater, she remembered the SS would come to the theater and they would go up there, and that she didn't know. We tried to get other people, and we could not get anyone else to speak to us. But she spoke to us, and I give her credit. And I get mixed things. People are like, how could she not have known? I have mixed feelings on it myself, but all I can tell you is because when we were doing this, I have a daughter also, who at the time was a little older than, I think she was 16 or 17 at the time, and I think that when we were shooting this, my daughter was around 18, and all I can say is that, I mean, at 16, 17, kids are, they're naive, they're not sure, and if they're told something, by people they trust, they're gonna believe it. And they may not question it, and especially, I think, in the atmosphere that was created in Germany at that time, to not question. So, you know, I find it very hard to make a villain, you know, out of this woman, and I give her credit for talking to us now. So I know people, you know, there's definitely people who disagree with me about this, but, I mean, with all the stuff that went on there, I mean, how can you villainize a 16-year-old girl, you know, for something back then? Okay, maybe, you know, maybe she looked the other way, maybe she should have, but you know what? There were plenty of people 30, 40 years old that should have stood up and said something and questioned something too, as opposed to, you know, a kid, right? So that's
They could have wound up in the camp themselves had they
for sure.
said something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They would become opposition, right?
They'd be killed. They probably wouldn't even end up in the camp.
Uh,
They'd probably just be killed on the spot. Anybody else?
Even
Yes.
though it wasn't an extermination camp, there were crematorium ovens. Did they notice that
Okay.
ash
So,
coming from that in the community? It was right there.
right, so at Buchenwald, there was only a crematorium at the end. I'd say they built it in the last, because we asked the same question. So we were told there was never a crematorium there until in the last year. They built it, but only because there were so many dead bodies, they didn't know how to dispose of them. And they started to burn them. So yes, and of course, you smell that. And, you know, but now it was towards the end, and that camp had already been that camp had been in existence since the early 30s. So, you know, and a lot of torture. But also they said, you know, they would torture, they would take them out in the woods, and if you're there, you'd get a better sense of it. The town is like a mile and a half, maybe 2 miles away. So, and it's just these big woods, and it's built on this hill. And I'll tell you, I had never been there in the winter, but I was there in April, and it's cold, and when it's windy, it's super cold. So these guys got there in January, and they're wearing like pajamas, you know, and, you know, no warm shoes or anything. So I don't even know how anybody survived, to be honest. But they would torture guys out in the woods, and you'd hear the screams. Not only that, but, you know, somebody brought up this point. They said that when it was a big camp, there was like at one point 70,000 prisoners there. There was plumbing and electrical work, and so people who lived in the city had to go up and do maintenance work and things. They saw what was going on, and they went back, and you think they maybe didn't tell? You know, maybe they told their wife, you know, everybody whispered about it, but, you know, people knew. People knew for sure. No?
Well, I would be remiss if I have to say that.
Yeah.
I was thinking a lot while the officer was speaking about how I don't think that what she's saying is accurate, but I don't think she's lying necessarily. I think that how it works in so many ways that you actively speak like you don't know, right? It's just sort of the avoidance gets baked into everyday life. So those electricians, people would have heard the screams, of course they would. But knowing how powerful the Nazis were, fear would make them actively disattend what they knew was
Sure.
right from the past.
Sure.
And I think that's what's so powerful about her testimony. She's kind of admitting that by not saying it.
Right. Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. Totally. Yeah.
We've heard about what this meant for all the people and all the survivors, and certainly it means a lot for us too to have this opportunity to listen to this and to hear from your experiences. One question that does come to mind for me is, what did this project mean to you, and how has this affected you?
I mean, the most important thing to me is that I feel like it was a gift to my father, and I mean, it was a lot of hard work for about 3 years, and but it was all I mean, I wouldn't change a thing about it. I would do it all over again, you know, because of just the way I know that the way he felt about it. And also, when I've seen the other three guys afterwards, and like I said, how their families, you know, how they've said thank you to us. So it's hard to describe how good it feels, basically. So, and you know, the thing also is that my father, when he went out and spoke, I mean, he spoke until his memory started to go and he couldn't do it anymore. He would never turn down an invitation to go and speak. So as to the best of my ability, I'm going to try to do the same, because I think it's important, because I'm sure none of you, even if you know about the Holocaust, you know some of the things that happened, nobody knows this story, right? There's nobody in this room who knew this story. Because I know people who know a lot about the subject and know nothing about the story. So I hope everybody here, I hope it's affected you in some way. You know, learning about this, that, you know, you see things, and sometimes you see things in documentaries in black and white seems like it's like a distance away, and it doesn't seem like it's real. But, you know, when somebody can come up and tell you that, you know, and now the best we can do is I can come here and tell you that I've spoken directly to these people that it happened to. And so, I know that these things really happen, and I can tell you how they felt. I think it's the next best thing to you actually shaking hands with them and speaking to them. So, I hope that's sort of what's come across tonight.
Will there be another reunion in 20?
April is the 75th, so I'm not sure. I mean, I know Naftali will be there. I don't know who else is going to be there. I'm going to be there in April, and we'll see who else is there. So right now, the big I go every year, so they have a committee there. There's a representative from every country, representing prisoners from every country from that time. And so the biggest push is to try to, their push now is just to try to tell, not necessarily this story, but the fact that there was this Camp Buchenwald and what happened, and trying to organize trips and things like that. So that's another thing we spoke about, is that, anytime I speak to anybody, especially associated with education, is if they want to take students or organize some sort of a trip, I can help do that. That's part of what we're supposed to do, is to connect the two and try to work out the logistics and make that happen. It'll open your eyes going over there, I'll tell you that. All right.
Do we have any more questions? It's your last call. Good.
Thank you.